My name is Megan Sullivan, 36 years old, and founder of Secure Pay. Last Tuesday, I was checking RSVPs for my housewarming party while finalizing details with the caterer. That's when I saw a text from my parents. "We won't be attending. Your lifestyle choices continue to disappoint us." I stared at my phone, a familiar knot forming in my stomach. Since childhood, nothing I achieved was ever good enough. My academic awards, business success, even my character all met with criticism. For a moment, sadness washed over me. Then something shifted. I straightened my shoulders and made a decision. If my own parents couldn't celebrate my success, I'd find people who would. Before I dive into how this story unfolds, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever had your achievements dismissed by family, hit that like button, you're not alone. Subscribe to join our community of people who've learned that sometimes your chosen family celebrates you better than your blood relatives. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. In a small Midwestern town where dreams were meant to be practical and success had strict definitions. I grew up in Springfield, Illinois, in a modest 3-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street. Our neighborhood was firmly middle-class, neat lawns, basketball hoops in driveways, and houses that all looked vaguely similar. My father, Walter Sullivan, worked as an accountant at Wilson & Partners, the same local firm, for 32 years. He prided himself on never missing a day of work, even driving through a blizzard once rather than calling in. My mother, Judith, taught English at Springfield High School, where her reputation for strict grading made students both fear and respect her. My parents lived by a clear set of values that they repeated like mantras at our dinner table. Save, don't spend. Security over risk. Practical trumps passionate. Their approach to life was cautious, prioritizing stability above all. They'd both grown up in families that struggled financially and had built their lives around avoiding that fate. My older brother Thomas was the model child in their eyes. 4 years, my senior, he followed our father into accounting, attending the state university just 45 minutes away, and returning to Springfield after graduation to work at a respectable local firm. By 30, he had checked all the boxes on my parents' approval list: stable job with benefits, mortgage on a sensible home, marriage to his college girlfriend Linda, and regular attendance at my parents' church. I, on the other hand, showed troubling signs of impracticality from an early age. At 8, I set up a lemonade stand, but quickly expanded to offering homemade friendship bracelets and pet rock painting services, creating what my father dismissively called a sidewalk conglomerate. By 12, I was fixing computers for neighbors, charging $15 per hour when most kids my age were babysitting for $5. "It's cute that Megan has these little hobbies," my mother would tell relatives, her tone making it clear that cute meant inconsequential. When I proudly showed my father the $340 I'd saved from my computer repair business, he nodded and said, "Now put that in your college fund where it belongs. You'll need a real job someday." In high school, I threw myself into technology and business clubs. When I won the state technology competition with a website I'd designed, my parents attended the ceremony but spent the car ride home discussing how these computer games were distracting me from more important subjects. The fact that I maintained a 4 gigapascals alongside my distractions never seemed to register. The real conflict came during my junior year when college applications loomed. I had set my sights on MIT. Their computer science program was unparalleled, and everything in me knew that's where I belonged. "Massachusetts?" my mother exclaimed when I mentioned it. "What's wrong with Illinois State? Thomas got an excellent education there." "MIT is the best tech school in the country, Mom." My father looked up from his newspaper. "It's also one of the most expensive. Be realistic, Megan." Despite their discouragement, I applied and was accepted with a partial scholarship. The day the acceptance letter arrived was both the proudest and most difficult of my young life. "We can't afford this," my father said flatly after seeing the remaining cost after the scholarship. And we won't support you taking out loans for an impractical degree when there are perfectly good schools right here. Computer science isn't impractical, I argued. Technology is the future. So is having food on your table and a roof over your head, he countered. Things you get from reliable, stable careers. That night, I made the decision that would define my relationship with my parents going forward. I accepted MIT's offer and took out substantial student loans, supplementing with 3 part-time jobs throughout college. My parents' response was a combination of disapproval and prophecies of future regret. During those 4 years at MIT, my calls home followed a predictable pattern. My excitement about a challenging project or a professor's praise would be met with, "That's nice, but have you thought about how you'll pay those loans with a computer job?" Or "Thomas just got promoted again at his firm." Comparisons to my brother were constant and always unfavorable. They did attend my graduation, sitting stiffly in the audience while I received my degree. As we took photos afterward, my father remarked, "Well, that's an expensive piece of paper." "Let's hope it was worth it," my mother added. "At least you're done now and can come back home to find something stable." But I wasn't done. And I wasn't going back to Springfield. I had bigger plans, plans that would only widen the gulf between my parents' vision for my life and the one I was determined to create. With my MIT degree fresh in hand and my parents' doubtful predictions ringing in my ears, I headed to Silicon Valley in 2009, right in the midst of the recession. My first living situation was far from glamorous. A tiny 2-bedroom apartment in Sunnyvale shared with 3 other recent graduates. My portion of the rent consumed nearly half of my entry-level salary at TechWave Solutions, where I'd landed a junior coding position. Those early days were a blur of long hours at work, followed by even longer hours at my kitchen table, where I continued coding by night. Dinner often consisted of ramen noodles or whatever was on sale at the grocery store that week. During our weekly calls, my mother never failed to mention how Thomas had already purchased a house back in Springfield. "You could have had this too," she'd remind me. "Working in a stable job back home instead of that crazy expensive place with roommates at your age." What my parents couldn't understand was that I wasn't just working a job. I was building something. During my time at TechWave, I noticed critical vulnerabilities in how online payment systems handled sensitive data. The solutions at the time were clunky, creating friction in the user experience while still leaving security gaps. I began developing a more elegant solution during evenings and weekends, a payment processing system that could provide bank-level security with the simplicity of a single click. 6 months into this side project, I attended a local tech meetup where I met Alex Chen, a brilliant security engineer with complementary skills to mine. Our conversation lasted until the venue closed, then continued at a 24-hour diner until sunrise. By morning, we'd sketched out what would eventually become secure pay on a stack of napkins. 2 weeks later, Alex and I met again to formalize our partnership. 3 months after that, I made the call to my parents that sent them into near panic. "You're quitting your job?" My father's voice rose an octave. "In this economy? For some startup pipe dream?" "It's not a pipe dream, Dad. Alex and I have a solid business plan and—" "Who is going to hire 2 kids with no business experience to handle their money?" my mother interrupted. "This is exactly the kind of impulsive decision we worried about when you insisted on MIT." Despite their reaction, Alex and I pushed forward. We set up operations in his garage in Mountain View, a fitting tribute to the tech startups we admired. Our savings gave us a runway of about 8 months to get secure pay off the ground. Those early startup years tested every ounce of resilience I possessed. We refined our technology while pitching to investors who often dismissed us before we'd finished our presentation. Too young, too inexperienced, too ambitious scope, the rejections piled up. Meanwhile, my student loan payments loomed large, and my parents' increasingly frosty phone calls didn't help. "Thomas just bought a vacation cabin," my mother mentioned during one particularly difficult week when our last potential investor had pulled out. "A little place on the lake. You could visit if you came home." The implied, when you give up this foolishness, hung unspoken between us. Our breakthrough finally came 3 years in, when a mid-sized e-commerce platform took a chance on our technology. Their online fraud dropped by 87% within the first month of implementation, while their checkout completion rate increased by 23%. Suddenly, other companies started calling us. Within 6 months, we moved from Alex's garage to a real office with 6 employees. A year later, our team had grown to 20, and we closed our first significant round of funding at $5 million. The next 3 years brought exponential growth as SecurePay's reputation for unparalleled security, combined with superior user experience, attracted bigger clients. Major tech publications began featuring our technology, and larger security companies made acquisition offers that we repeatedly turned down. Alex and I shared a vision of building SecurePay into something that would transform online transactions, not just be absorbed into a larger corporation's portfolio. When Forbes included me in their 30 under 30 list, I nervously sent the article to my parents, hoping this mainstream recognition might finally change their perspective. My mother's response was deflating. "I hope you're not letting this attention go to your head. Pride comes before a fall, you know." The ultimate validation of our work came 5 years after founding SecurePay, when we took the company public. The IPO exceeded all projections, valuing the company at just over $2 billion. My personal stake translated to a net worth that still felt surreal to someone who had been counting pennies for ramen just a few years earlier. Yet even this milestone didn't shift my parents' narrative. When I called to share the news, my father's response was, "Well, I suppose that's impressive on paper, but these tech valuations are all bubbles anyway. Don't count your chickens." My mother added, "I hope you're being smart and saving this money rather than getting caught up in that flashy California lifestyle." Despite my financial success, I continued living relatively modestly, partly due to being too busy to spend money, but also because my parents' frugal values had been deeply ingrained. I remained in the same 2-bedroom condo I'd purchased after our first funding round, drove a practical hybrid car, and invested most of my earnings back into the company or long-term funds. But as SecurePay stabilized into steady growth and our management team expanded, I found myself, at 36, finally having the time to contemplate what I really wanted outside of work. And surprisingly, after years of pushing against my parents' caution, I realized I did want something they valued: a home. Not just a place to live, but a true home that reflected who I'd become and what I'd achieved. A place where I could finally exhale and feel settled. What I didn't anticipate was how this desire would trigger the most painful confrontation yet with my parents' disapproval. After nearly 15 years of putting almost everything back into the business or sensible investments, I finally decided it was time to create a personal space that reflected my journey. Despite my financial capability to purchase almost any property, I approached house hunting with the careful consideration my parents had inadvertently instilled in me. I connected with Gloria Ramirez, a real estate agent who specialized in helping tech entrepreneurs find homes that balanced luxury with sensible investment potential. Our initial conversation set the parameters: oceanfront if possible, architecturally significant, privacy, and good bones if renovations were needed. "I don't need flashy," I explained to Gloria as we sat in her office. "I want something that feels like a sanctuary after years of 18-hour workdays." For 3 months, we viewed properties throughout the California coast. Some were immediately dismissed as too ostentatious crystal chandeliers and marble statues weren't my style. Others felt too cold and corporate, resembling the boutique hotels I'd stayed in during business trips. Then, on a misty morning in Malibu, Gloria took me to a property she described as uniquely suited to your sensibility. As we wound down the private drive, the modern structure came into view, a harmonious blend of glass, sustainable wood, and stone that seemed to emerge organically from the coastal landscape. The architect designed it to minimize environmental impact while maximizing the connection between indoor spaces and nature, Gloria explained as we approached. The moment I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't experienced before, a sense of belonging. The open floor plan featured floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing panoramic ocean views, but the space still felt intimate rather than showy. A central atrium with a living tree brought natural elements inside, while thoughtful design ensured privacy from neighboring properties. The previous owner was a tech executive who's relocating to Europe, Gloria mentioned as we toured the 5 bedrooms, home office, and various living spaces. They've already purchased their new place, so there's motivation to sell. When Gloria mentioned the asking price $6 million, I felt that familiar twinge of my parents' fiscal conservatism. It was significantly less than I could afford, but still a number that would have made Walter and Judith Sullivan faint. It's a solid investment, Gloria added, noting my hesitation. This area has appreciated consistently, and the property has rental potential if you ever wanted that option. I spent the drive back to San Francisco calculating and recalculating, not because I needed to, but because spending this much on myself triggered deep-seated guilt. That evening, I called Alex for perspective. "Megan, you built a billion-dollar company from a garage," Alex said bluntly. "You've earned this 10 times over. More importantly, I've watched you pour everything into secure pay for 15 years while denying yourself any real luxury. It's time." 2 weeks later, I made an offer. After brief negotiations, the house was mine. The purchasing process was surreal, signing documents for a transaction that would have constituted my parents' entire lifetime earnings several times over. The renovation process took 6 months. I worked closely with an interior designer who understood my vision: warm minimalism with natural materials, cutting-edge technology hidden seamlessly within the design, and spaces that could accommodate both solitude and entertaining. The home office became my favorite space, positioned to capture the sunrise over the Pacific, with built-in technology that allowed me to control everything from lighting to security with voice commands. The kitchen was designed for someone who rarely cooked elaborate meals but wanted the option for when inspiration struck. The primary bedroom suite featured a sitting area where I could watch storms roll in over the ocean. As the project neared completion, I found myself excited about sharing this achievement. Despite years of disappointment, some childlike part of me still hoped for my parents' approval. This tangible symbol of success, not just financial but the creation of a personal sanctuary, felt like something even they might appreciate. I composed the housewarming invitation carefully, including a personal note to my parents. "Mom and Dad, I know we've had our differences about my choices, but this home represents years of hard work and careful planning. It would mean so much to have you here to celebrate this milestone with me. I'll arrange first-class tickets and a hotel for as long as you'd like to stay." For 2 weeks after sending the invitations, I checked my phone constantly for their response. Other RSVPs flowed in: friends, colleagues, mentors, all expressing enthusiasm. But nothing from Springfield. Then, while reviewing design details with the interior designer, my phone buzzed with a text from my father's number. "We won't be attending. Your lifestyle choices continue to disappoint us. This display of excess is exactly what we raised you to avoid. Please reconsider your priorities." I excused myself to the bathroom, where I read and reread the message, each word a tiny dagger. After all this time, all this work, all this success, they still couldn't offer a single word of congratulations or support. My brother Thomas called that evening. "Megan, I'm sorry about Mom and Dad," he began awkwardly. "You know how they are about money being spent on anything they consider unnecessary." "A home is unnecessary?" My voice cracked despite my effort to sound casual. I know. It's just, they've been telling everyone in Springfield that your success is, well, exaggerated. When Aunt Kathy mentioned your new house, Mom told her it was probably some tiny condo being described in California terms. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only were they rejecting my achievement, but they were actively diminishing it to others, rewriting my narrative to fit their preferred story of my misguided choices. Have they always done this? I asked, suddenly questioning every interaction with extended family over the years. Thomas's pause told me everything. They're proud in their way, Meg. They just show it differently. After hanging up, I sat on my partially furnished terrace overlooking the ocean and had a moment of crystal clarity. For 15 years, I'd been chasing approval that would never come. Success, failure, modesty, achievement, none of it would ever be enough because the problem wasn't my choices. The problem was that I had made choices at all, rather than accepting theirs. I picked up my phone and texted Alex. Time to throw the housewarming party of the century. My parents aren't coming, and I'm finally okay with that. The weight that lifted with that message was 15 years of seeking validation from people determined not to give it. The ocean had never looked more beautiful than it did in that moment of liberation. The Monday after my parents' rejection, I contacted Sofia Martinez, one of Los Angeles's most sought-after event planners. When her assistant mentioned she was booked 6 months out, I was prepared to wait, but Sophia called personally after hearing the basic details of my situation. I had a cancellation for next month, she explained, though I suspected she might have rearranged her schedule. And frankly, your story resonates with me. My father didn't speak to me for 3 years when I left law school to start my event business. Our initial meeting at the villa turned into a 3-hour conversation about not just the party, but the meaning behind it. I showed Sophia around the property, explaining my vision for different spaces. I initially thought something small and elegant, I admitted. About 60 people, cocktails and canapes, very understated. Sophia looked out at the expansive terrace and lawn, extending toward the ocean. You could do that, she said thoughtfully. Or, this could be a true celebration of your journey, acknowledging everyone who supported you when your parents didn't. How many people have believed in you when it mattered? The question shifted my perspective entirely. This wasn't just a housewarming. It was an opportunity to thank the community that had become my chosen family. Over the next week, Sophia and I developed a comprehensive plan that transformed my initial modest gathering into a meaningful celebration. Each area of the property would represent a chapter in my journey. The entrance and foyer decorated to evoke my Midwest origins, but blossoming into something more vibrant. The main living area, showcasing Secure Pay's evolution with subtle interactive displays. The terrace and pool area themed around California's influence on my life, and quiet contemplation spaces for meaningful conversations. The guest list expanded thoughtfully. Beyond current friends and colleagues, I reached out to early mentors. Professor Jenkins, who had championed my MIT application despite my parents' resistance, Mrs. Abernathy, my high school computer science teacher who had first shown me that women could excel in tech, even Mr. Grayson, who had hired 16-year-old me to rebuild his small business website and paid me professional rates when everyone else offered exposure. Alex helped me track down Secure Pay's first employees, many of whom had moved on to other ventures but remained part of our extended professional family. I invited early investors who had taken chances on us when our operation was still in Alex's garage, and the first clients who had trusted their businesses to our untested technology. I even extended invitations to childhood friends from Springfield who had kept in touch despite distance and diverging paths. These connections, maintained through sporadic texts and social media, suddenly felt important to acknowledge. The most difficult invitations were to extended family. After learning how my parents had minimized my achievements to relatives, I decided to be transparent. I included a note with these invitations. I've recently learned that there may be some confusion about my work and life in California. While my parents have chosen not to attend this gathering, I'd be honored to have family members who are interested in seeing this chapter of my life firsthand. Transportation and accommodation assistance is available if needed. The food planning reflected my journey as well. I worked with Chef Mateo, known for his innovative California cuisine, to create a menu that nodded to my Midwestern roots while celebrating coastal abundance. We designed food stations rather than a formal seated dinner, encouraging movement and conversation throughout the evening. "What about this station with elevated versions of college student budget food?" Chef Mateo suggested. "Gourmet ramen, artisanal grilled cheese, upgraded instant noodles, a nod to your startup days." The idea delighted me, and we expanded it to include other chapters. Midwest Comfort Foods Reimagined, MIT, inspired intellectual cuisine with scientific presentations and dishes representing key moments in Secure Pay's international expansion. For beverages, we created custom cocktails named after pivotal moments. The Garage Startup, a sophisticated twist on cold brew coffee, the fuel of our early days. The First Round, champagne with an investment of rare Japanese whiskey, and the IPO, a complex layered drink that changed color as you consumed it. Music planning led to an unexpected treat, discovering that one of our early developers had left tech to pursue a music career with his indie band. When I reached out, they immediately offered to perform, adding a personal touch to the entertainment. As RSVPs began arriving, each yes felt like a confirmation that I had built meaningful connections despite my parents' absence from this chapter of my life. Even a few relatives responded positively, including my mother's sister Catherine, who wrote, "Always knew you were destined for extraordinary things. Your mother forgets I changed both your diapers, and you were always the one reaching for what was just beyond your grasp." The week before the event, anxiety crept in. I walked through the nearly completed house with Sophia, suddenly seeing it through my parents' potential perspective. "Is this too much?" I asked, gesturing at the infinity pool that seemed to merge with the ocean beyond. "Will people think I'm showing off?" Sophia stopped and turned to me. "Megan, there's a difference between celebration and ostentation. Everything about this home and this event reflects who you are: thoughtful, successful but unpretentious, and generous in sharing your journey. This isn't about flaunting wealth, it's about creating a space for connection." The morning of final preparations, I received a surprising call from Thomas. "Hey Meg," he said, sounding uncharacteristically hesitant. "I know Mom and Dad aren't coming, but would it be okay if I did? Linda has that nursing conference, so it would just be me." The unexpected request brought tears to my eyes. "Of course, Thomas. I'd love that. Don't tell Mom and Dad yet," he added quickly. "I'll deal with that after." This small act of rebellion from my rule-following brother felt more significant than he could possibly know. For the first time, someone from my family of origin was choosing my narrative over my parents. Alex arrived early the day of the party, bringing a housewarming gift, a small olive tree for the atrium. "In Mediterranean cultures, they represent peace and prosperity," he explained. "Seemed fitting for this new chapter." As I hugged him, he whispered, "You did it, Megan. Not just the company or the house, but this life you've created. Tonight isn't about who isn't here, it's about celebrating with everyone who is." The morning of the housewarming dawned with perfect Southern California weather, clear blue skies, gentle ocean breeze, and temperature hovering at an ideal 75 degrees. As I sipped coffee on my terrace, watching waves crash against the shore below, I felt a mixture of excitement and lingering sadness. The absence of my parents would be conspicuous, at least to me. By noon, the event staff had arrived to handle final preparations. Florists arranged coastal-inspired centerpieces throughout the house. Bartenders set up multiple stations, and Chef Mateo's team transformed the kitchen into a sophisticated operation. Sophia orchestrated everything with calm efficiency, occasionally checking in with updates or last-minute questions. My closest friends arrived early to provide moral support and help with any details. Jen and Miguel, who had been my friends since our first year at MIT, immediately started exploring the house with appropriate exclamations of admiration. "This place is absolutely you," Jen declared, running her hand along the reclaimed wood dining table. "Elegant without being showy, and that view, I might never leave." Alex arrived with his wife Priya, carrying the promised olive tree and a bottle of champagne. For a pre-party toast, he explained, as Priya pulled flutes from her bag. To new beginnings and chosen family. The simple gesture nearly broke my composure. These people who had celebrated my successes, supported me through failures, and never once suggested I should have chosen a different path, were more family to me than the people who had raised me. As the official start time approached, I changed into the outfit I'd selected with care. A simple blue dress that conveyed understated elegance rather than ostentation. The only truly expensive item I wore was a pair of sapphire earrings I'd bought after our IPO, my first significant personal indulgence. The first wave of guests arrived precisely at 6. Former professors from MIT expressed genuine delight at the success of their former student. Early Secure Pay employees reminisced about the garage days, sharing stories I'd forgotten in the whirlwind of growth that followed. Professional contacts who had become friends over years of collaboration mingled easily with newer acquaintances. I was in the middle of giving an impromptu tour to a group including our first investor when I spotted Thomas standing awkwardly near the entrance. My brother looked out of place in his Springfield sensibility khakis, slightly too formal, button-down shirt clearly selected as his California appropriate option. Excusing myself from the group, I crossed the room to greet him. "Thomas, you made it." The hug I gave him felt both familiar and strange. We hadn't embraced properly in years. He looked around, clearly searching for an appropriate word. "Impressive, Megan. Let me show you around before it gets too crowded," I offered, guiding him through the main living spaces. As we reached the quieter library area, Thomas finally relaxed enough to speak candidly. "I didn't tell them I was coming," he admitted. "Said I had a conference in San Diego." "You lied to Mom and Dad?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Thomas had always been the compliant son. "I'm 40. It's ridiculous that I still worry about their approval." His expression showed the same conflict I'd felt for years. "Megan, I should have stood up for you before now. The way they've talked about your success, the way they've dismissed everything you've accomplished, it's not right." The admission was so unexpected that I found myself fighting tears. "Thank you for saying that. It means more than you know." Our moment was interrupted by Thomas's phone buzzing. He glanced at it and grimaced. "Mom, third time she's called in the last hour. You should probably answer or she'll send the Springfield police to do a welfare check," I joked, but there was truth behind it. Thomas stepped away to take the call while I rejoined the growing gathering. The party was hitting its stride. Chef Mateo's food stations were drawing appreciative crowds, the signature cocktails were flowing, and the acoustic set by our former developer's band provided perfect background ambiance. 15 minutes later, Thomas returned looking tense. "They're suspicious," he muttered when he found me, "asking specific questions about the conference and whether I've happened to run into you while in California." "You're a terrible liar," I said, trying to lighten his mood. "Always have been. That's why you were the one who could sneak out in high school and I never dared." His smile faded quickly. "They're pressing for details, photos of the event. I think they suspect I'm here." The realization that my parents were essentially spying on my party through my brother cast a momentary shadow over the evening. I was about to respond when I overheard a conversation from a nearby group that included my mother's sister Catherine and 2 cousins. "The way Judith talks, you'd think Megan was living in some sort of delusional fantasy," Catherine was saying. "I've followed Secure Pay since they went public. Megan's accomplishments are extraordinary. Walter and Judith's inability to acknowledge their daughter's success says more about them than about her." My cousin Rachel nodded. "Mom always said Aunt Judith couldn't stand when anyone outshined her. Remember how she reacted when Uncle George got that promotion?" I stepped away, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but the conversation confirmed what I'd suspected. My parents' dismissal of my achievements stemmed from something deeper than simple concern about financial responsibility. Thomas had also overheard and looked troubled. "Is that how the rest of the family sees Mom and Dad?" Before I could answer, Alex appeared, smoothly integrating himself into our conversation. Sensing the tension, he deftly steered the topic toward introducing Thomas to some of our early team members. "You should meet Maria," she wrote the core algorithm that made our first prototype functional, Alex said, guiding Thomas toward a small group by the windows. The momentary crisis averted, I circulated among my guests, finding joy in connecting people from different chapters of my life. My high school computer science teacher was deep in conversation with our current CTO. My first client was exchanging business cards with our newest partner. The most emotional moment came when Professor Jenkins, now retired from MIT, took my hands in his. I remember that determined 18-year-old who came to my office hours asking about additional scholarship opportunities because her parents wouldn't help with tuition. Look at you now. This success, he gestured around the room, is exactly why I fight for students like you. As the evening progressed, I noticed Thomas checking his phone with increasing frequency, his expression growing more concerned. Eventually, he pulled me aside onto the quiet side terrace. "Megan, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low. "Mom and Dad know I'm here. Someone from Springfield saw my social media post about being in California and mentioned it to them." "What social media post?" I asked, surprised that my cautious brother would make such a mistake. "I checked in at the airport," he admitted sheepishly. "Habit. Didn't think about who might see it." "It's fine, Thomas. You're an adult. You can visit your sister." "They're furious. Dad said I've chosen sides and Mom is." He hesitated. "Mom is crying, saying we've both betrayed them." He showed me the string of increasingly upset text messages. The last one read, "Send pictures of this excessive display so we can see what our daughter values more than family." The request sent a chill through me. "They want you to spy on my party?" Thomas looked miserable. "I think they expected me to report back, yes. To confirm their narrative about your wasteful lifestyle or something." The realization that my own parents wanted evidence to use against me was the final severance of my hope for their approval. But rather than pain, I felt an unexpected clarity. "You know what, Thomas? Take the pictures." I straightened my shoulders. "Take pictures of this beautiful home I've worked for. Take pictures of the incredible people who've supported me when our parents wouldn't. Take pictures of what success looks like when it's earned through risk and innovation rather than fear and limitation." Thomas stared at me, then slowly shook his head. "No, I'm not their spy." He turned off his phone completely and slipped it into his pocket. "Tonight, I'm just your brother, finally seeing what you've built. And Megan, it's extraordinary." That simple acknowledgement from my brother, the golden child who had always followed our parents' script, felt like a victory more significant than any business success. We rejoined the party just as my former mentor Marcus Freeman arrived, having flown in from London specifically for the event. Seeing him, the venture capitalist who had believed in secure pay when we had nothing but a prototype and determination, brought home how far I'd come. "The woman of the hour!" Marcus proclaimed, embracing me warmly. "From pitching in a coffee shop with nervous hands to this magnificent achievement. I always knew you'd change the world." As guests mingled and conversations flowed, I found myself on the main terrace where SecurePay's first client, Derek Washington, was gathering attention for an impromptu toast. When Megan and Alex first presented their security solution to me, my technical team said they were too small, too untested, too risky, Derek recounted. But there was something about Megan's absolute conviction. She didn't just believe her technology would work, she knew it with certainty. 7 years and 0 security breaches later, I'd say that conviction was well-founded. He raised his glass. "To Megan, who makes the impossible look inevitable." As appreciative laughter and applause filled the air, I caught Thomas watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, something like awe mixed with regret. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness that my parents weren't there to witness this validation. But as I looked around at the gathering of people who had believed in me, supported me, and celebrated my journey without condition, I realized I wasn't missing anything essential after all. As the sun began its descent toward the Pacific, the party transformed. Lighting designed to enhance the architecture activated automatically, casting the house and grounds in a warm glow. Torches along the pathway to the beach ignited, creating a magical corridor between the main terrace and the shoreline. The band transitioned from acoustic background music to more upbeat numbers that drew people toward the designated dancing area. From my vantage point near the infinity pool, I watched diverse groups from different parts of my life mingling naturally. Technical conversations blended with reminiscences, and new connections formed between people who might otherwise never have met. The celebration had transcended a simple housewarming to become something more meaningful, a gathering of a community that had formed around shared values and experiences. "You've created something remarkable here," noted Gloria, my real estate agent who had become a friend through the house hunting process. "And I don't mean just the property." "What do you mean?" She gestured toward the varied groups of guests. "Most successful people I work with have a clear division between professional contacts and personal friends. You've cultivated authentic relationships across all aspects of your life. That's rare." Her observation resonated deeply. While my parents had always compartmentalized their lives, work colleagues rarely becoming personal friends, church acquaintances kept separate from neighborhood relationships. I had unconsciously created a more integrated community. The evening evolved into a series of spontaneous toasts and stories, each offering a different perspective on our shared journey. Maria, our first security engineer, recounted the week we worked 72 hours straight to patch a potential vulnerability before launch. James from marketing recalled the disaster of our first trade show when our demonstration crashed spectacularly, only to be saved by Megan's quick thinking and transparent honesty with potential clients. Alex's toast, coming after several others, brought a hush to the gathering. "Most of you know the professional milestones of secure pay," he began. "But what you might not realize is that Megan built this company while fighting a personal battle few understood." He looked directly at me. "For 15 years, I've watched her achieve extraordinary things while being told she was making a mistake. I've seen her doubt herself because voices she trusted insisted she was wrong, despite all evidence to the contrary. Yet she never compromised her vision or her values." He raised his glass. "This house isn't just a symbol of financial success. It represents the courage to believe in yourself when even those closest to you cannot see what you see." To Megan, my business partner, my friend, and the most stubbornly brilliant person I know, the response was immediate and overwhelming applause that seemed to encompass not just appreciation for the toast, but acknowledgement of the unseen struggles behind visible success. As conversations resumed, I noticed Thomas standing slightly apart, watching the interactions with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. I made my way to him through the crowd. "Overwhelming?" I asked gently. He nodded. "It's like seeing an alternative universe version of you. These people know a completely different Megan Sullivan than the one Mom and Dad describe." "Which one seems more real to you?" I couldn't help asking. Thomas considered this seriously. "Both, in different ways. But this one," he gestured around us, "this one seems happier." He hesitated before adding, "I've never heard anyone talk about you the way these people do, with such respect." The observation stung even as it validated my choices. Before I could respond, someone called for attention as my MIT roommate Jenny had taken center stage. "Some of you know Megan as the tech visionary, the CEO, the industry leader," Jenny began. "I know her as the girl who stayed up all night helping me rewrite my thesis when my computer crashed the day before deadline, who bought me plane tickets home when my dad was hospitalized and I was broke." Success didn't make Megan generous, she always was. More stories followed, each illuminating aspects of my journey from different perspectives. Professor Jenkins recalled my determination to find obscure scholarships and grants. Early employees shared anecdotes about the company's humble beginnings. Friends from various chapters of my life contributed personal memories that collectively created a mosaic of my journey. Most surprising was Thomas's impromptu addition. Taking a deep breath and stepping forward, my brother spoke with uncharacteristic emotion. "As Megan's brother, I have a unique perspective." He glanced at me nervously before continuing. I followed our parents' blueprint for success, the safe route, the approved choices. Megan chose a different path, one that required tremendous courage I've only recently begun to appreciate. His voice strengthened as he continued. Tonight I've met the community she's built, seen the impact she's had on countless careers, and understood for the first time the full magnitude of what my sister has accomplished. Raising his glass, he concluded, to Megan, who had the courage to define success on her own terms, something I'm only now learning to do. The vulnerability and honesty in his toast created a powerful moment of connection between us across the crowded room. For perhaps the first time, Thomas was seeing me clearly not through our parents' narrative, but through his own observations. As scheduled entertainment transitioned to spontaneous dancing, I found myself drawn into conversations with various guests, each interaction revealing new connections and insights. The technical demonstration areas I had worried might seem too work-focused for a housewarming had become popular gathering spots, with animated discussions about security innovation flowing naturally into broader topics. Around midnight, Alex organized a champagne toast on the main terrace overlooking the now moonlit ocean. As glasses were distributed among the remaining guests, I found myself moved to speak. "Thank you all for being here tonight," I began, looking around at the faces illuminated by the terrace lighting. This home represents more than a personal milestone for me. It's a testament to the power of community of mentors who believed in potential colleagues, who became friends, friends who became family, and occasionally, I smiled at Thomas, family who surprise you in the best possible ways. Taking a breath, I continued more personally than I'd intended. Many of you know that my parents chose not to be here tonight. What you may not know is that their absence represents a pattern of disapproval that has shadowed much of my journey. For years, I've sought validation that never came. The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. Standing here tonight, surrounded by people who have supported my vision, celebrated my successes, and helped me learn from my failures, I finally understand. I've been looking for approval in the only place I couldn't find it, while overlooking the abundant validation all around me. Raising my glass, I concluded, to chosen family, the people who see you clearly and love you anyway. Thank you for being mine. The response was immediate and emotional embraces, raised glasses, and a sense of collective understanding that transcended the typical party atmosphere. In that moment, with the ocean stretching endlessly before us, and a house full of genuine connection behind us, I felt a completeness that had nothing to do with material success and everything to do with authentic community. The party continued past midnight, gradually winding down as guests with early morning commitments began to depart. By 1:30, only about 30 people remained close friends, Thomas, and a few out-of-town guests who were staying nearby. We had moved to the more intimate setting of the indoor living area, where conversation flowed easily among comfortable seating arrangements. I was deep in conversation with my former mentor, Marcus, about potential applications of our security technology in developing nations, when my phone buzzed with a security alert. The property had a sophisticated system that sent notifications whenever someone approached the main gate without a pre-registered code. Glancing at the notification, I froze. The security camera showed my parents standing at the entrance, my father repeatedly pressing the intercom button. "Megan, what's wrong?" Marcus asked, noting my expression. "My parents are at the gate," I replied, disbelief evident in my voice. The parents who refused to attend and told me my home was a wasteful extravagance. Across the room, Thomas was already looking at his phone with alarm. Our eyes met, and he crossed quickly to my side. "They've been texting me for the past hour." I had my phone on silent. "They must have tracked my location." Alex joined our huddle, immediately assessing the situation. "What do you want to do?" The question momentarily paralyzed me. Part of me, the little girl still seeking approval, wanted to rush to the gate and welcome them, pretending their previous rejection hadn't happened. Another part wanted to ignore them completely, letting them experience the rejection they had so casually inflicted on me. I should talk to them, I decided finally. But not in front of everyone. Can you keep the party going while I deal with this? Of course, Alex nodded. Use the pool house if you want privacy. I sent instructions through the security system to direct my parents to the separate entrance for the pool house, located away from the main gathering. Thomas insisted on accompanying me. You don't have to come, I told him. This isn't your battle. It became mine when I decided to be here tonight, he replied firmly. Besides, they'll be less likely to create a scene if I'm present. We waited in the tastefully appointed pool house, which functioned as a self-contained guest suite. Through the windows, I could see my parents making their way along the designated pathway. My father walked stiffly, his disapproval evident even at a distance. My mother moved more hesitantly, her eyes darting around to take in the property's features. When they entered, the contrast between their Springfield sensibility and the coastal luxury of even this secondary space was immediately apparent. My father wore his church suit in Southern California at nearly 2 in the morning. My mother had chosen a floral dress more appropriate for a Sunday luncheon than a late-night confrontation. Walter, Judith. I greeted them formally, unable to summon the warmth of Mom and Dad after their text message rejection. Their eyes traveled around the space, taking in the high-end finishes and ocean view, visible even from this secondary building. My father's lips tightened. So this is what was so important, he said, gesturing dismissively at the surroundings. This ostentation. This home, I corrected quietly. The one you refused to visit when invited properly. We received information that concerned us, my mother interjected, her voice carrying that familiar note of disappointment about the scale of this display. Thomas stepped forward. From who, Mum? Who's been feeding you information? Your cousin Patrick's wife saw pictures on someone's social media, she admitted. And we tried calling you repeatedly, Thomas. When you didn't answer, we became worried. Worried, I repeated flatly. Not worried enough to support your daughter's housewarming, but worried enough to show up uninvited at 2 in the morning when you thought no one would be watching. My father's face flushed. We came to see for ourselves what you've been spending your money on. This, he gestured around again, this gaudy excess. This is not how we raised you. No, I agreed calmly. You raised me to believe that my choices would never be good enough, that my achievements were luck or exaggeration, that my success was something to be hidden rather than celebrated. We raised you to be sensible, my mother countered, to understand that flashy displays like this isn't a flashy display, Thomas interrupted, surprising all of us with his vehemence. This is Megan's home, a home she earned through years of work you dismissed and risks you criticized. And it's beautiful. My parents stared at their normally compliant son, as if he'd started speaking in tongues. Thomas, you can't possibly approve of this. This wastefulness, my father sputtered. What I've seen tonight isn't waste, Thomas replied. I've met people whose careers Megan launched. I've heard stories about her generosity, her innovation, her integrity. The woman they describe bears no resemblance to the daughter you talk about. My mother's expression shifted slightly, the first hint of doubt I'd seen crack her certainty. We only want what's best for Megan. This lifestyle is mine to choose, I interjected firmly. I've spent 15 years trying to earn your approval, and tonight I finally understood that it's not available to me, regardless of what I achieve. But here's what you need to understand. I don't need it anymore. The declaration hung in the air between us. My father's face darkened further. If you're choosing this display over your family values, that's exactly the false choice you've always presented, I cut in. Success versus values, achievement versus family. I reject that dichotomy entirely. Thomas moved to stand beside me, physically demonstrating his support. Dad, you and Mom need to understand something. The family gathered in that house tonight, the one you weren't willing to join, includes people who have supported Megan unconditionally for years. They've celebrated her successes and helped her through failures without ever making her feel she had to choose between achievement and acceptance. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but whether from emotion or manipulation was impossible to discern after years of similar displays. We just don't understand why you need all this. She gestured vaguely around us. You've never tried to understand, I replied, surprising myself with my calmness. You decided 15 years ago that my choices were wrong, and you've filtered everything I've done through that assumption. My father straightened his already rigid posture. If you're going to speak to your mother that way, perhaps we should leave. Perhaps you should, I agreed. But before you go, you need to know that this is the last time I'll allow this dynamic to continue. Moving forward, our relationship will be based on mutual respect, or it won't exist at all. Are you giving us an ultimatum? My father demanded incredulously. I'm establishing boundaries, I corrected. You're welcome in my life and my home if you can be supportive, or at least respectful. If not, that's your choice. My mother turned to Thomas, clearly hoping to regain an ally. Thomas, surely you can make her see reason. Thomas shook his head slowly. I think Megan is being perfectly reasonable. And frankly, after what I've seen tonight, I have some rethinking to do about my own choices. The united front Thomas and I presented seemed to finally penetrate my parents' certainty. My father looked from one of us to the other, his expression a mixture of confusion and anger. You've both been corrupted by this California mentality, he stated flatly. When you're ready to remember the values you were raised with, you know where to find us. With that pronouncement, he turned and walked out, my mother following after a moment's hesitation and a last tearful glance. When the door closed behind them, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Thomas put his arm around my shoulders. I'm sorry they came, he said quietly. I'm not, I replied, surprising myself with the realization. For the first time, I said exactly what I needed to say, instead of what I thought they wanted to hear. We stood in silence for a moment before Thomas spoke again. What you said about boundaries, did you mean it? Every word, I confirmed. I'm done seeking approval that's never coming. As we walked back toward the main house, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. The confrontation had been difficult, but it had also been clarifying, like lancing a wound that had festered for too long. Alex met us at the door, concern evident in his expression. Everything okay? I nodded, a genuine smile forming. Better than okay. For the first time in my adult life, I think everything is exactly as it should be. Behind him, the remaining guests continued their conversations, unaware of the personal watershed that had just occurred. These people who had chosen to celebrate with me, who saw my success as earned rather than excessive, were the community I had built while searching for approval in the wrong place. Let's rejoin the party, I suggested, linking arms with Thomas and Alex. I believe we were in the middle of a celebration. The morning after the party dawned with remarkable clarity, both in the pristine blue sky visible through floor-to-ceiling windows and in my own mind. Despite the late night and emotional confrontation, I woke feeling rested and centered in a way I hadn't experienced before. Alex, Priya, and about 5 other close friends who had stayed overnight gathered on the main terrace for a casual brunch. Chef Mateo had left a magnificent spread of breakfast pastries, fresh fruit, and quiche before departing the night before, which we supplemented with coffee and mimosas. So, Alex said once we were all settled with plates, are we going to talk about the parental ambush or pretend it didn't happen? I smiled at his directness. Actually, I'm surprisingly okay with what happened. For the first time, I stood my ground without hoping for their approval afterward. Thomas joined us midway through this conversation, having slept in one of the guest rooms. His normally perfectly combed hair was slightly disheveled, and he had borrowed a casual t-shirt from the collection I kept for guests, looking remarkably unlike his usual buttoned-up self. "Morning," he mumbled, making a beeline for the coffee. After taking a fortifying sip, he turned to the group. "Did Megan tell you about last night's visitors?" "We were just getting to that," Priya replied, passing him a plate. "Are you okay?" That couldn't have been easy. Thomas considered the question seriously. I'm processing. It's strange to suddenly see your parents through different eyes after 38 years. As Thomas settled into a chair, he revealed information that put my parents' behavior in new context. There's something you should know about Mom and Dad, he began hesitantly. Something that might explain, though not excuse, their reaction to your success. He explained that our parents had experienced significant financial struggles early in their marriage, information they had carefully concealed from us children. Dad didn't start out as an accountant, Thomas revealed. He had his own business, a small investment firm. It failed spectacularly when his partner embezzled client funds. I stared at my brother in shock. Dad was an entrepreneur? He never mentioned anything about owning a business, because it ended badly, really badly. They nearly lost everything, including the house. He narrowly avoided legal trouble but had to start completely over at 35. Thomas sipped his coffee before continuing. And Mom had to abandon her plans for a PhD in literature to take the teaching job to keep us afloat. This revelation cast my parents' extreme caution in a new light. Their insistence on security, their suspicion of ambition, their fear of financial risk all stemmed from genuine trauma they had experienced but never processed properly. How did you find this out? I asked, still trying to absorb this reframing of my childhood. Uncle George told me years ago, when I was considering starting my own accounting practice instead of joining an established firm. Dad found out and was furious with him for putting ideas in my head. So when I started taking business risks, I began. You were triggering Dad's deepest fears, Thomas finished, and Mom's too. Their financial security was shattered once before. Alex, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. That explains their reaction to risk, but not their inability to celebrate your success once it was established. Secure Pay isn't a risky startup anymore. Thomas nodded. That's where it gets more complicated. I think seeing you succeed where Dad failed created a complex emotional reaction he's never been able to acknowledge, let alone process. It's easier to dismiss your achievement as luck or excess than to confront what it says about his own choices. This perspective shift didn't erase years of hurt, but it provided context I had never had before. My parents weren't just irrationally opposed to my choices, they were operating from deep-seated fear and possibly unacknowledged regret about their own paths not taken. The conversation expanded as others shared similar experiences with family expectations. Alex described his immigrant parents' initial horror at his decision to leave a prestigious engineering job for a startup, their cultural background making entrepreneurial risk seem particularly dangerous. My father didn't speak to me for 8 months, Alex recalled. Now he tells everyone his son is a tech innovator, but he needed to see the outcome before he could support the journey. As we talked, I found myself developing a more nuanced understanding of success beyond material achievement. Each person around the table had navigated their own path through family expectations, cultural pressures, and personal ambitions. After brunch, most guests departed with warm hugs and promises to return. Thomas, however, asked if he could stay an extra day. I'd like to see more of your world here, he explained, if that's okay. The afternoon that followed became a turning point in our sibling relationship. We walked the beach below the villa, the rhythmic crashing of waves providing background to the most honest conversation we'd ever had. I've always envied you, Thomas admitted, as we watched surfers riding distant waves. Your courage to break away, to pursue what you wanted regardless of the cost. Me? I envied you, I countered. The easy relationship with Mom and Dad, their automatic approval of your choices. Thomas laughed without humor. Easy because I never challenged them. Never made choices they didn't pre-approve. He picked up a stone and tossed it toward the water. Do you know I wanted to study architecture in college? I've always been fascinated by building design. This was news to me. I had no idea, because I never pursued it. Dad pointed out how impractical and competitive that field is, how accounting offered security and respect. So I followed his blueprint, instead of creating my own. He looked at me directly. Until last night, I didn't realize how much I'd given up. That evening, I gave Thomas a more thorough tour of the house in daylight, explaining the thinking behind various design elements. In my home office, he lingered over the architectural drawings, asking thoughtful questions that revealed his suppressed interest in the field. "You know," I said carefully, "it's never too late to explore that interest. Not necessarily as a career change, but as a passion." "Maybe," he mused, running his fingers along the detailed rendering of the house's structural elements. "Linda's been telling me I need a hobby beyond golf." Before he left the next morning, Thomas surprised me with a confession. "I've been thinking about starting a small side business, financial consulting specifically for creative professionals, architects, designers, artists who need someone who understands both finance and creative industries." The blend of his established skills with his suppressed interests struck me as perfectly suited to him. "That sounds brilliant, Thomas. You'd be uniquely qualified." "I might need some advice on the startup aspect," he admitted. "If you're willing to mentor your older brother." "I think that could be arranged," I replied, feeling a new connection forming between us, one based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. As we hugged goodbye, Thomas whispered, "Thank you for showing me what's possible when you build a life on your own terms." After he left, I received a text from my Aunt Catherine. "Your parents will come around or they won't. Either way, you've built something beautiful, not just a home, but a life of integrity. Proud of you. Always have been." Her message crystallized something I'd been feeling since the party. The validation I had sought from my parents for so long had been available from other sources all along. I simply hadn't recognized it because I was looking exclusively where it was most withheld. Exactly 1 year after that transformative housewarming party, I stood on the same terrace watching another California sunset. The house had truly become a home during these 12 months, no longer just a symbol of achievement, but a space where I felt completely myself. Professionally, the year had brought continued success. Secure Pay had expanded into new international markets, and our latest security protocol was becoming the industry standard. I had grown more comfortable with delegation, finally achieving something resembling work-life balance after years of all-consuming focus. But the most significant changes had been personal, particularly regarding family relationships. Thomas and I had established a new pattern of genuine connection. Our weekly video calls evolved from slightly awkward check-ins to meaningful exchanges about everything from business strategy to personal growth. He had launched his financial consultancy for creative professionals as a side venture, which was already attracting clients through word of mouth. My relationship with my parents had taken a more complicated path. After the confrontation at the housewarming, we had no contact for nearly 2 months. The silence was broken when my father experienced a minor heart attack, not life-threatening, but significant enough to provide perspective. During my hospital visit, which I made without expectation of reconciliation, my father and I had our first honest conversation in perhaps decades. In the vulnerability of his hospital room, some of his rigid certainty seemed to soften. "You've done well for yourself," he acknowledged quietly when we were briefly alone. "The company, it's impressive. I've been reading about it." It wasn't an apology or even full approval, but from Walter Sullivan, this represented monumental progress. My mother proved more resistant to change. Her ingrained patterns of passive criticism and martyrdom were too deeply established for quick transformation. Our interactions remained carefully managed, focused on neutral topics, with clear boundaries I no longer hesitated to enforce. "I think Mom resents that I've stopped seeking her approval," I told Thomas during one of our calls. "She doesn't know how to interact with me without that dynamic." "Give her time," he advised. 40 years of behavioral patterns don't change overnight. Dad's health scare created a crack in their certainty. Light gets in through cracks. As the anniversary of the housewarming approached, I decided to host another gathering not as large or elaborate, but a meaningful celebration with those who had become my closest circle. When Thomas asked if he could attend again, I jokingly replied, "Only if you don't sneak in this time." 2 weeks before the event, I received an unexpected call from my father. "Your mother and I were wondering," he began awkwardly, "if that invitation you mentioned to Thomas, if that might possibly include us. Just for a short appearance, of course. We wouldn't want to impose." The request stunned me into momentary silence. "You want to attend my anniversary gathering? We thought it might be appropriate to see your home properly, under better circumstances than last time." After our conversation, I sat on the terrace considering this development. A year ago, I would have been overjoyed at this slight indication of acceptance. Now, I felt cautious, but open to the possibility of a healthier interaction. I called Alex to discuss my parents' potential attendance. "Are you ready for that?" he asked frankly. "It's your celebration. You don't owe them inclusion." "I know," I replied. "But I think I'm secure enough now to have them in my space without seeking their validation. That's progress, right?" The evening of the gathering arrived with perfect weather once again. This year's celebration was more intimate, about 40 people who had become my closest circle, including several who had attended the previous year and become regular guests at my home. Alex announced SecurePay's latest expansion into innovative security applications for humanitarian organizations, a project close to my heart. Thomas shared progress on his consulting business, which had already necessitated reducing his hours at the accounting firm to manage growth. My parents arrived exactly at the time specified in the invitation, dressed more appropriately for California, this time my father in business casual rather than a full suit, my mother in an elegant but simple dress. Their discomfort was evident as they entered a space where everyone else shared established relationships and inside jokes. Thomas immediately assumed the role of bridge, introducing them to people who might provide common ground for conversation. I greeted them cordially, but without the desperate need for approval that had characterized our previous interactions. "Welcome to my home," I said simply. "I'm glad you could see it under better circumstances." My father nodded stiffly, then surprised me by adding, "It's very thoughtfully designed." The integration with the natural landscape is impressive. Coming from him, this observation represented significant effort. My mother remained more reserved, her comments limited to safe topics like the weather and the food. Their stay lasted precisely 90 minutes, long enough to be considered a visit, but not so long as to risk deeper engagement before they excused themselves with appropriate thanks. It wasn't the warm family reconciliation that movies might portray, but it was a beginning, a small acknowledgement that my life as I had built it might have legitimacy even if it wasn't the life they would have chosen for me. After they departed, Thomas rejoined the main gathering. "Well, that was only moderately uncomfortable," he observed wryly. "Actually, it was better than I expected," I replied honestly. "No criticism, no tearful manipulation, no implied moral judgments. By Sullivan family standards, that's practically effusive approval." Later that evening, as the party continued around us, I received a text from Thomas that he'd sent despite being just across the room. "Proud of you, sis, not just for your success but for your boundaries. That takes more courage than starting a company." As the final guests departed near midnight, I found myself alone on the terrace, looking out at the same ocean view that had first drawn me to this property. The home that had initially represented achievement had become something more significant, a physical manifestation of the life I had chosen and the boundaries I had established. My phone chimed with another message, this one from Alex. "Another successful Sullivan gathering in the books. Your house has become a proper home this past year. The difference is palpable." His observation captured something essential. The difference wasn't in the property itself, but in my relationship to it and to everything it symbolized. I had stopped seeking external validation for choices I knew were right for me. The $6 million ocean villa was never really about the price tag or the view or even the achievement it represented. It was about claiming the right to define success on my own terms. I looked out at the moonlit waves, grateful for both the struggles and the triumphs that had brought me to this moment of clarity. The most beautiful view, I had discovered, wasn't the Pacific Ocean stretching to the horizon, though that remained breathtaking. The most beautiful view was a life built with intention, surrounded by people who truly see you for who you are rather than who they think you should be. Have you ever had to create boundaries with family who couldn't celebrate your success? What helped you find peace with that situation? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you or gave you perspective on your own family dynamics, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about finding your own path. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family expectations. Sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, your success deserves celebration, even if it comes from places you didn't initially expect.